Hey guys, so this is going to be a fairly short video. I put a post on the For Beginners forum on chess.com recently saying, what would you like to see, what videos could I make to help improve your game, help you to win a bit more. And there's a player called Random Filipino from the US who said, could you do a video about countering the Queen's Gambit? Okay, so here goes. Now, generally I don't tend to see the Queen's Gambit myself, because at the moment when white starts with 1d4, I'm playing the Dutch with f5, so I don't get to see that. But if you want to respond to d4 with d5 when you're playing black, let me give you a little tip with a really cool trap in it. If you're a beginner, if you're sub 1000, sub 1200, you should get, and you're facing someone who wants to play the Queen's Gambit, then this could be something that you can pull off quite frequently, and it's a very neat way to crush your opponent who wants to play the Queen's Gambit. So Queen's Gambit, d4, d5, and then white's second move is to play c4. Okay, so the idea of the Queen's Gambit is that white is trying to tempt you to capture the pawn on c4, at which point then white could play, for example, e4 and get a very strong centre, lots of control over the centre in return for that pawn that is gambited. The most popular move is knight to f3, which is played a lot, so that's defending this pawn, over defending that pawn, and white's also intending to follow up with e4 as well. Now, at the highest levels, at master games, you don't see d takes c4 very often. That's the Queen's Gambit accepted, right? That's it's not played too often. Black tends to decline the offered gambit for obvious reasons, because it gives white a nice advantage in the game. Now, there are lots of different ways to decline it, but here's the one I'm going to show you today. Okay, you reply with your second move, pawn to e5. So you're going to move your king's pawn, and this is called the Albin Countergambit. Okay, so a gambit is where you normally offer one or more pawns for free to your opponent, but in return for some compensation. So you might get a stronger position on the board, you might get to develop your pieces because your opponent's spent a move capturing a pawn. So in return for that you can get more pieces out into the board and hopefully get a head start on the rest of the game and try and maybe recapture that material later on down the line. Now, this is a counter gambit. So white has gambited a pawn. This pawn there on c4 is gambited because black could take it apparently for free, right? So what we're doing with this move, with e5, is we're offering our own pawn as a sacrifice in return. Okay, now clearly it's not a good idea for white to capture the pawn on d5, because that then leads to queen takes d5, and this pawn's now pretty much pinned. If they go ahead and capture that, then you've got queen takes queen, the king is forced to recapture, so white then loses castling rights and is going to have a tough time getting into the game. So that's very uncommon. C takes d5 has only been played 29 times at the master level, compared to the most popular move, which is d takes e5, right? So white gladly accepts the counter-gambited pawn, the offered pawn. Now, one thing you must not do in this situation, do not be tempted to capture the pawn on c4. The correct move now is to push this pawn forward to d4. Okay. Now, the queen's not going to capture because you lose the queen. Okay. So what you're looking for is for white to think, okay, here's an idea. Right? White wants to think, let's push e3 and try and get black to capture the pawn. And if black captures the pawn, then you have the same situation. You exchange queens, black is forced to do that, and white should have a comfortable game, right? So here's the thing, okay? You don't capture that pawn at this point in time. This is called the Lasker Trap, okay? So let's just run through it again. Let's run through the moves again, okay? D4, D5, C4, the Queen's Gambit. E5, the Albin Countergambit, okay? Now normally what will happen is that white will capture on E5 and then we push our pawn, okay? If E3 is played at this point, you are now rubbing your hands, okay? Because what you play now is bishop to b4 check. Okay, the bishop is now looking there at the white king, and I mean, this knight is not going to come to c3 because it'll be captured by the pawn. Then the pawn recaptures, and bishop recaptures with check again, and a fork on the king and the rook. So that's not going to happen. You might potentially see knight to d2. That's actually a pretty decent move, but it's not ideal because if knight comes to d2, then you capture another pawn. You're attacking the knight, the queen's attacking the knight, the bishop's attacking the knight, everything's attacking the knight, and white is not going to be in a happy place. So by far a more common move that you're likely to see is bishop to d2. And this is pretty catastrophic for white, as you will see. Okay, so the next move is, your bishop's being attacked here, we ignore it. We ignore the attack. We capture on e3. We're attacking the bishop, but look, here's a free bishop. So white is thinking, this is great for me. I am in clover. You know, happy days. I'm going to capture that bishop. My queen is also looking at black's queen. I'm a whole bishop up. How can I possibly lose the game? Well, this is how you can possibly lose the game as white, okay? Because we have this deadly pawn now on the third rank. It's made its way all the way up the board, right? You capture on f2. And the king is now in check, okay? So pawn takes f2 check. There are only two legal moves on the board. The king cannot move to d2 because the queen is looking at d2. So that's out of the question. The king really cannot capture on f2 because look what happens. King captures on f2, the queen is lost, and black wins the game. Okay, so there's only one reasonable move for white to do, and that is king to e2. So white has already lost castling rights, and here's the clever thing. This is the twist. Okay, pawn takes knight. So you've recaptured, you've regained that lost minor piece, seeing as we've lost our bishop, but you do not promote to the queen. Okay, if you promote to a queen, the rook just captures, and white's probably okay. I mean, he's in a bit of a mess in the board right now. But here's what you do: you capture the knight, and you under promote the pawn. So you promote to a knight, not a queen or a bishop or anything else. You promote to a knight, and the reason for that is that it comes with check. Okay, so the white king is now in check. Okay, now if the rook goes ahead and captures there, you've got, for example, bishop to g4 wins the queen. Okay, so the rook cannot simply capture. What if the king comes over here? Same problem as before. White loses his queen and the game. Okay, so what can white do? Can't stay there. Can't go to here because that would be in check. Can't go to here because he's going to lose the queen, right? So can't go to here or to here because that would be in check by the queen. So he's only really got two moves. He can move here or he can move here. Okay, and obviously this one's no good because again you lose the queen, right? So really the only move for the king left is to go back to e1. And now at this point the queen comes out to h4 with check. Let's say the pawn comes forward, the queen comes here now with another check, and we have a fork on the king and the rook. All right, so that is the Lasker attack, or the Lasker Trap. Let's run through it all again from the start, from the black perspective. Okay, so d4 opening, d5 is played, c4 the Queen's Gambit, e5 the Albin Countergambit. D takes e5, and then remember, you don't capture, you push the pawn to d4. And if e3 is played, you bring out your bishop with check. Okay, the most logical move or the most natural move for white to block with the bishop, attacking the black bishop, we ignore the attack and we just proceed and grab that pawn. If the bishop grabs, it's all over. Pawn takes f2 with check, and the king cannot capture the pawn because the queen would be lost. The king has to move there. We capture white's knight and under-promote to a knight with check. The king has to move back there, and then the queen comes in and delivers the coup de grace. White is busted open. If you look at his pawns, they're in a terrible state. He's already lost one minor piece. He's about to lose his rook. The knight is safe. The knight can come out here with more checks, and white really is completely finished. So if you're somebody who's afraid of the Queen's Gambit, then this is a nice kind of sideline that you might want to learn, study it, look at the variations. I'd recommend you use the Explorer in chess.com and see what happens. You should get some good results with the Albin Countergambit, and more than that, you should have an awful lot of fun at the same time. So hope that's been useful for you, random Filipino, and have fun. I'll see you next time.